Peace, Shoshana. This is Yeshi wishing you well. Um, for my ethnicity family gallery project, I chose to focus on Caribbean Americans in New York City as a population. The reason being is pretty. It's an intimate choice for me because I grew up in a predominantly Caribbean, Afro Caribbean, and African American community that my mother still resides in today and that we actually live in now. Um, and so I grew up with neighbors from Tennessee, the Carolinas, Alabama, and also grew up with neighbors from places like Montserrat, Aruba, Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, Grenada, Guyana, Barbados. My friends growing up's parents, if they were not immigrants themselves, were first generation Caribbean Americans. So the influence was around me in music. It was around me in culture. It was around me in food, cuisine. Um, it was around me, and even down to how I wash clothes and clean a house, the products that they use, all of those things have influenced a great deal of who I am. I put ammonia in my clothing, like washing my clothes, till this day, because it gets rid of cellular waste and vibes. And I put camphor in my mop water with Murphy's oil soap and ammonia because of those things. So a great deal of this community speaks to who I am. And I was adopted. Both of my parents actually are from the South, or their families are from the South. But I always felt like I was so akin to people from the Caribbean that I would not be surprised if I were to find out that someone in my family was from the Caribbean, because I just connect with the culture, the people, the accents, everything so much. So, the first to start out with a little bit of history, and because there's so many different islands, a lot of my research might have been specific to a certain area within the Caribbean. So it might have been a focus on Barbados, a focus on Trinidad, a focus on the British West Indies. But what I have found is that across the board, with the exception of some differences here and there, they pretty much hold the same tenets as far as socioeconomics, religion, their views on sexuality. Their political systems may be a little different depending on what rule governed them, whether it was, through colonialism and imperialism, whether it was the British, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish. Those influences will definitely bleed through into their legislation, the way that they educate children, some of their social constructs, the types of foods, things like that. But for the most part, a lot of who they are comes from those influences. So, I'll start with Trinidad. So, with Trinidad, there was a tribe of people, the Caribs and the Arawaks, who descended from South America, who actually were the first people to be in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, they were known to be these warriors, hunters, and gatherers, and um, would raid other islands for their goods, their resources. Um, and I always like to know about the different tribes that were the first descendants on a particular island, because it kind of fuels the energy of the place. Like, I know in Jamaica they were the Maroons, and the Maroons were these revolutionary people, people who were warriors, who were deemed as being violent, outcasts, but really and truly were upholders of their community, took care of each other, were probably the first example for, many people of a collectivist culture, of a collectivist culture. Um, Sorry about that. Of a collectivist culture. But Maroons, their vibe and energy speak a great deal to, they say, the intensity, the aggression, and the hostility that they will say is synonymous amongst people from Jamaica. And that is definitely not true of everyone from Jamaica, but in very small circles. If there was a party that was happening in Jamaica and a fight broke out, somebody would say, well, who was throwing a party? Was it Jamaicans? He was like, yeah. And it's like, okay, because their parties were always known to be violent. Trinidadians are more of a loving, dancing, happy-go-lucky kind of people, kind of partying, synonymous with calypso, and their singing voices, their singing accents, to be peaceful. So their parties were always joyful and happy. So the energy of the first descendants, I think, bleeds through into the people, no matter how liberal and no matter how conservative. So that's something about the Caribbean that I find to be magical, that their ancestral spirit is still very deep within who they are as people, their pride. And no matter, like I said, if you could have a grandmother who is a Bible-toting grandmother who doesn't believe in anything unless it's written in the word. But I guarantee that she still has her herbal preparations when she gets sick and knows different things to do homeopathically to take care of you. All of those things come from those same roots and bush doctors that she is against. So a natural childbirth, all of those kinds of things. Or when you're sick, you go get into the ocean, having fish tea, those kinds of things. Every island has that kind of running through their identity, the culture of who they are. And the interesting thing about them coming and migrating to the U.S., a lot of those things slowly but surely, as they begin to adapt into the U.S. and the culture here, they begin to slowly forget and slowly become what they see in their environment, unless they are you also have some that migrate back and forth, like they work for 6 months and then go home for 6 months, or they're working here specifically to save for a home. So there's so many different dynamics, but ideally the migration was influenced by disenchantment with just economic hardship. There not being enough work, there not being enough opportunities at expanding and elevating education. So there were a lot of reasons for the migration. And some of the first migrations happened in the 17th century. I think people coming from Barbados and the British West Indies, which led to an involuntary migration where people were brought over specifically to be laborers, to harvest sugarcane, different natural resources that are growing across the islands. And it's still, it's in its fourth wave. It's still people migrating to the United States from the Caribbean for the same type of work, same type of opportunities. So, and a great deal of Caribbean Americans actually, in the beginning of migration, they were coming to places like the South, because South Carolina was some of the first places where you would find Caribbean people were going. And then there, later on, it ended up being Boston and Florida. And then now the largest population of Caribbean Americans resides in New York City, specifically Brooklyn and Queens, those boroughs of New York. So, and I'm going through my notes, so please forgive me. So as far as religion, so a great deal of the Caribbean folks that I grew up with were they were never there was no middle. They were either hardcore, Baptists, or they were just Rastafarians, like completely opposite of that. And there was also Obia, which is a lot some African spirituality that some people may call voodoo, but there was a lot of different influences of Africa on the island. You have Yoruba, Santeria, Espirito, I think it's called. You have definitely have Christianity, Catholicism, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, and I said Santeria, yes, and so something that I found among immigrants to the U.S. So basically, through their religion, they provided great information about the ongoing transformations, because as they migrated from the Caribbean coming into the US, they brought all of these different cultural influences with them and had to figure out a way to still practice if that's what they were going to do in the States. So attracting a community that is already doing some work like that, that's similar to that, or starting their own movements. And for, a lot of people in the Caribbean, uh, their spirituality and social opportunity to socialize are one and the same. So a lot of most of their family will go to their chosen place of worship, and then on top of that, those end up being neighbors and family, friends, and people you go to school with. So it's always an opportunity to socialize, and for people who are devout parishioners, it is very much the center of the culture, in a lot of places in the Caribbean. Let's see. Yeah, so I wanted to move on to parenting because I'm looking at the time and it may be really choppy, but I'm trying to do this in 20 minutes, so I do apologize. If it's not as smooth, I probably should have done index cards, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to get in as much information as possible and to share my findings with you as much as I possibly could. So as far as parenting, there is like this motto amongst a lot of Caribbean parents: spare not the rod and spoil the child. So corporal punishment is pretty much a norm. Most Caribbean American adults will let you know that their parents definitely spanked them. Um, and to other people on the outside looking in may have thought that this was abusive, but for Caribbean parents from the Caribbean, this is what they learned to do as far as to make sure that their children are respectful, to keep their children in line. And when a lot of parents came to the U.S., a lot of them began to change the way in which they discipline their children. It was more of talking to their children and more of taking away devices and privileges, like they couldn't use their phone or maybe they couldn't go out, rather than actually disciplining them physically. So that is, one of the aspects of parenting. And I grew up seeing that. And I also am a product of parents who definitely spank their children. And I've chosen in my parenting to change that legacy, to shift that. And also, it was never about your children being disrespectful. Was like the worst thing that a child could do. Children are not to be in adult conversations or speaking back to their parents. And most of the households, the mother was the center of the household. A lot of times, the father would be deemed to be irresponsible, and this is definitely a specific socioeconomic class. People who were usually middle class to poor were more of where the mother was at the center and the father didn't have much say. And whatever money came into the household, the mother was managing that. And I know this is going into roles, but it's one and the same, right? So that was something that was occurring. Now, depending on a specific socioeconomic class, if you had more money, the woman was more of looking to the man to lead, and because he's taking care of the household. But for the most part, as far as domestic needs and taking care of the children and being the decision maker of the household, the mother is usually at the center. And then a lot of times there are situations where men would leave the family to go and look for work. So you have a lot of men who are actually here, Caribbean Americans, who they have families back home, that they're here and have been here only maybe supposedly for a couple of months, and end up they're here for 15 years, away from their children, their wives, their parents, watching them grow. They're not able to see that on a consistent basis. And the weird thing is that New York, the more expensive things get, it's very difficult to go back home as frequently as they may have been accustomed to in the past. So I found that to be very interesting. So gender roles we kind of touched upon. But yeah, and women, if a woman is married, she is considered to have like a certain way about her. She isn't supposed to speak loudly. She's supposed to dress a certain way. House should be kept. Um, she isn't curt with her man. And then whereas the women who are single, they exhibit a bit more freedom. They wear more colorful clothes, clothes that might be a little more suggestive. They don't take any crap from anybody. So that I found to be very interesting. And still, in most of the research, they spoke of men in a way of um, being abusive, maybe not being responsible with money, not showing up consistently for their children, um, which, you know, we know is the case in some cases, but not across the board. Um, so, yeah, and then as far as the socioeconomic classes, which I touched on a little bit, traditionally middle class women have been financially supported by their husbands and are expected to act like ladies by being sweet, patient, and well groomed, light skinned, and sexually monogamous. Yeah, there's a whole level of colorism that's going on in the Caribbean, which to me shows you the lack of self love and acceptance that people have for themselves that exist. There's something called caking that goes on, or bleaching, which is going on all across the Caribbean. It started in Africa, which with them selling bleaching creams and soaps, skin lighteners, things like that. But now they have something called like cake soap that people wash their skin with in order to make their skin lighter. And it's become this kind of strange trend that was made popular by a reggae artist, Vibes Cartel, who's actually like in jail for murder, and but he's the poster child for this wanting to alter who you naturally come as, like basically to me signifying that you're not enough. So you know, I'm always looking at those things and have always looked at those things as like, you know, our people are hurting, you know. So right, so I touched on that a bit. So attitudes towards psychotherapy. Um, it's really interesting because in this particular population, and it's the same with African American people, or I say Africans living in America, um, uh, that when you have a challenge or any type of problem, you're more prone to um, talk to an elder, to talk to a pastor, to talk to a spiritual um, guide, or to talk to an elder in your family, or to a sister, or someone that's close to you, because there's this, you know, understanding that you don't. I remember growing up being told like you don't put your business outside. You don't, you know, it's like that is almost, I think it's worse bringing shame to your family by telling someone, like a stranger, you know. So talking to a psychotherapist, you're talking to a stranger about your family's business, and that's looked down upon. It's worse for you to shame your family than for you to get help or get assistance navigating through your challenges, trying to break a cycle. They like, no, you told about your grandmother. Nobody, you. That's a stranger. You know, that's that I found very interesting. And then just, you know, like I said, we don't think about um, what a population, what may be the root of their challenges, just migration issues, because why people are coming to the U.S. And like I said, I grew up with friends who I never saw their father. Their parents were married, had never been divorced. The mother may have come to the States to work, and she ended up taking the children. I have a friend whose mother, I remember they lived in a one-bedroom apartment. The mother's bedroom was in the living room. The boys' room, it was one room, three bunk beds and a single bed. This is where I knew them to live until they were all grown. And the father lived in Dominica, and he was still there. And you know, my friend had been separated from his father for like 30 years. He hadn't seen him in 30 years. So imagine just you're dealing with parent and child separation, and then unification, like them coming back together and what that looks like, and how the children feeling about that, how is the wife or the husband feeling about that, and the other family members. So that is definitely something that excuse me, that influences how we would need to communicate with this population, um, and um, also thinking about uh, where is it? It was something that I wrote. It was really good. Okay, I talked about that already. I just wanted to make sure that I'm covering everything. In the meantime, though, I don't want to miss, because it's 2030 now. I did my community genogram here. I don't know if you can see it. And so this is me in the middle. There's a heart between my daughter and her father, my daughter's father and me, because she was definitely conceived in love. So this is Tim here. And then down here, and I don't know why I chose diamonds, but down here, this is Issa, my daughter. And down here is her school and her school community, and she goes to a cooperative school, so it's definitely about community participation, and the parents are very hands-on, and we're in touch with everyone, like everyone's in touch with everyone. And this is that community bore more interactions with parents, teachers, and more children that we didn't know before. Um, I just put initials, so I have to remember what these initials are. Um, Here at the bottom, I think is, well, let me go here. I have at the top, I have um, these diamonds here, a C and a W. Those are my parents. And then next here at the top are Rob, Brian, Nan, and Charles, and Numi, who are like my community of friends and family that I've been friends with for over 15 years. We don't see each other every day, but we're pretty close. And I know if I ever needed anything, um, I could call them. And I also know that I could be pretty transparent with all of them. Over here at the bottom is my sister, Nikki, her ex-husband, Harry, who I'm still very close to. Um, Molly, who is my 17-year-old niece, um, and I don't know, Harry, Molly. Oh, and Chico, the family dog, who is not like a dog at all. I'm not a dog person, but I love this dog. He has the greatest energy on the planet. He was lost recently, and the family like went into, it was really crazy how much he is a part of our family. And then in this area, I have unknown family because, as I've shared before, I am adopted, and there's a whole cultural identity that I have no connection with. Like, my sister said to me, she's like, I feel like your mother had to have been a vegetarian or a Caribbean woman because of her diet, your diet, and how you're able to, like, these are the foods that you love naturally. So, um, yeah, so that. Then here I have a line going, and it's CIS, it's my cohort. Um, then I have ancestral and spiritual community, and there's the Babalao and Ola Tutu. Um, and then also just my own things that I've gathered on my own. And then I think here, just trying to see what this is. Oh, this is my work community here. And this is Louise, this is Callie, Buwan, and Eddie, and I work with them every day. We work at a college in the city, and just some really lovely people, and I'm grateful to have met them. Um, as we speak, she's like been accommodating me this whole week, letting me work from home so I could get my work done. So they I support them and they support me. It's really really cool, and I'm grateful for them. And then I know that there's one place that I probably, oh, and then I put a little bubble here to fill it up with um, the community that I create based off of the things that I um, have an interest in, have not been able to get to yet, whether that's, singing more, preparing food more, opening up the store that I want to open up, like doing voiceover work, like all of my passions, everything that I enjoy doing, creating a free form like dance and movement, like group and cipher, like, all of it, all of my loves. So this is my genogram. So I hope you can see it. Move it back a bit. Yeah. And then I just felt the need to do like a little key with some of the colors of the flags of the islands that I was focusing on. So this is Jamaica's colors. This is Guyana, and I think Grenada's colors as well. Um, which one is this? I don't know. Oh, Haiti. This one's Haiti. This one's PR, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. This is Barbados. This is Trinidad, which I have a connection with on multiple levels. Like, I love Trinidadian people. And I said Jamaica, so that was a key. And then I did another picture of all of the things that I think about when I think of the Caribbean, like pineapples, mangoes, coconuts, ocean, sun, vegetation, so this is that portion of my ethnicity, gallery, and I will make sure to send over a document with some quotes that I really connected with that kind of rounded out the research and this project for me, as well as a reference list. So thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. All right, bye.